Hi, Shobhi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay, yeah, I can hear you as well. So are the other is Hari sir and
Yeah, they're supposed to join.
yeah. Hmm.
There's no background noise at my end, right?
Sorry,
Is there any background noise at my end or is it fine?
background noise? No, there's no background noise. It's fine.
Okay, great. Okay, tell me something. I can share a PPT here, right, in Zoom?
Yeah, yeah, you can. There's an option, no share screen.
Okay, share screen. Right.
Is there an option?
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
got it.
Hari sir, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll introduce you, sir, and I'll hand over to you thereafter.
Okay.
So once I do share screen, I won't be able to see anything, right? I will only see the PPT in my screen.
Yeah,
Is that?
I'll be able to. Everybody else will be able to see.
No, you will also be able to see.
Yeah.
So
Acha.
you
Can
will
I
also
just?
see. Yeah.
Can we just try it once now before?
Yeah. Right.
Okay. It says you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it. So Brunila, can you
Just
do
a
something
second.
about that?
Yes, can you see me? I can
Yes, I
see.
can.
So can you switch on your video or? Yeah, I can see you.
Are you not switching on the video for the others? For
Uh,
the speakers, you should switch it on, no?
the attendees won't be able to switch on the videos.
Who attend is fine, but all the the speakers should be able to.
Yeah, the speakers will be able to now. So can you?
I'm now, my video is on.
So if you can switch on your video, I think the video is switched off from your end because I can see Shobik here. So yes, we can see you.
ওকে সৌভিক এই প্রেজেন্টেশনটা কি দেখাবে নাকি
ভাবছিলাম আপনার কি মনে হয়?
হ্যাঁ না প্রেজেন্টেশনে তুমি ওই
আপনার কি-
ইফেক্ট অফ কোভিড দেখাতে পারো
হুম।
বাট ওই স্পিকার টিকার গুলো পরে এলে ঠিক আছে মানে we don't want to waste time about talking about the speakers because anyway এটা introduction তো হয়ে যাবে I'll say that both of you are lawyers, you know, one you are practicing locally and he is practicing in UK. Lawyer means everybody knows a lawyer. You don't need to explain anything more about them. What I'm saying is let us focus more on the business side.
না অ্যাবসলিউটলি, তাহলে যেটা করব যে যখন আপনি ইন্ট্রোডিউস করছেন তখন জাস্ট ওই
স্কিপ করে
স্লাইডটা
নিয়ে
দিয়ে
তুমি
দেবো।
শুধু ওই ডাইরেক্ট কোভিডে চলে হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ
Definitely.
তুমি ওই স্লাইড গুলো কোভিডে চলে যাও।
স্যার আপনার ভয়েস ব্রেক করছে, আমি জানি না অভ্রনীলা শুনতে পাচ্ছি কিনা।
ইফেক্ট অফ কোভিড ওই স্লাইডে চলে যাও সোজা। তোমার এই তুমি এই হেডফোনস ইউজ করছো না?
হ্যাঁ করছি আমি।
আমি দেখে নিচ্ছি আমার ইন্টারনেটটার কি অবস্থা। হ্যাঁ এখন শুনতে পাচ্ছো?
হ্যাঁ স্যার শুনতে পাচ্ছি।
হ্যাঁ আমি আমার ইয়েতে ওর নাম কি আমার 3টে নেটওয়ার্ক আছে, আমি এখন 4G তে ট্রান্সফার করে।
আচ্ছা আচ্ছা, আমি স্যার একবার শেয়ার স্ক্রিনের অপশনটা একটু দেখে নিচ্ছি।
হ্যাঁ দেখে নাও।
আচ্ছা এটা এখন দেখা যাচ্ছে তো পুরো ফুল স্ক্রিনটা, যেটা ফার্স্ট পেজটা
তুমিও তো দেখতে
দেখা যাচ্ছে। ঠিক আছে।
আচ্ছা কলকাতায় কি কিছু চেঞ্জ হয়েছে আজকে? কিছু ইয়ে আছে, নিউজ আছে গভর্নমেন্টের কাছ থেকে?
স্যার অ্যালকোহল অনলাইন ডেলিভারি করবে গভর্নমেন্ট, সেটা হচ্ছে নিউজ।
গভর্নমেন্টই ডেলিভার করে দেবে?
গভর্নমেন্টই ডেলিভার করবে।
বাহ, তৃণমূলের লোকজনের একটা চাকরি হয়ে গেল, ভালো।
হ্যাঁ মহারাষ্ট্রতে অ্যালকোহল ওরা বন্ধ করে দিয়েছে কেওস হচ্ছে বলে, এখানে গভর্নমেন্ট বলেছে যে দে উইল অনলি ডেলিভার।
ভালো। আমার মনে হয় অ্যালকোহল ইজ দি অনলি কমন ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজ উইচ ইউনাইটস ইন্ডিয়ান্স। All state governments, central government, everybody is in favor.
হ্যাঁ
No objection to that. তুমি straight away you want to go into your presentation?
আপনি বলুন কিভাবে করব। অরিজিৎ দা, we are on the call, can you just join in? Okay, thanks. Hi sir.
ঠিক আছে, let us take what I'm saying is you know I know it may, let us see what is our crowd কেমন আছে, তারপরে আমরা ডিসাইড করব। তুমি normally we will go as per your plan, but in case we have lot of crowd or very little crowd, then we can change the format.
বাট আমরা কি এখান থেকে দেখতে পারবো কি ক্রাউড কি আছে না আছে?
দেখতে পারবে, তুমি নিচে দেখো না, তোমার কন্ট্রোল স্ক্রিনে দেখতে পারবে কজন পার্টিসিপেন্ট আছে বলে।
আচ্ছা পার্টিসিপেন্টস, হ্যাঁ
অ্যাটেন্ডিজ এখন অনেকে 5 জন অ্যাটেন্ডিজ এসেছে।
রাইট।
অভিষেক সেনগুপ্ত, কিংশুক রায়, মহেশ শাহ, পিয়ালি বাসাক, তানাই সারাফ। তুমি দেখতে পাচ্ছো?
আমি ডিটেইলস দেখতে পাচ্ছি না, আমি 8 জন দেখতে
কেন
পাচ্ছি।
কেন?
আচ্ছা আচ্ছা অ্যাটেন্ডেন্স, রাইট গট ইট হ্যাঁ। আচ্ছা অরিজিৎ হ্যাজ জয়েন্ড আই থিংক।
হ্যাঁ
অরিজিৎ,
গুড আফটারনুন অরিজিৎ।
Hi, apologies. Has it already started or is it at
No,
30
we
minutes
are
past?
It's going to start. It's going to start.
Okay.
I can see a big yogic posture from you.
I have no idea why that is there. That has something to do with Facebook, which is not at all professional in these circumstances. But yeah. You know what? Let me try and get rid of this.
No, you just switch on your video.
Half-naked man with a Christmas hat on his head. Okay.
You can just switch on the video.
I don't know which one is worse. My ugly self.
This is better.
Right. So, Harida, how did you get that background? Please tell me. I need that.
You can just configure that in Zoom.
Can you?
Arijit, we have other attendees also.
Yeah, but they can't listen to what we are speaking now, na? Or Abranila, is it?
I think it's
on?
open.
Okay.
Yes, attendees can listen to us.
Oh, okay, good.
Oh my
good.
dear. My
No,
apologies.
that's good. So,
So-
Arijit, so how is London weather today?
It's actually very pretty. So it's about 15 degrees. The sun is out, which is not great news for Corona because we are a bit sun crazy in this country, as you know. We get so little of it. So a lot of people actually come out for running, walking the dogs, and I think that has a implication. What's it like in Kolkata today?
Kolkata, our government has decided to deliver liquor at home. That is the best piece of news we have heard in some time. Instead of spreading coronavirus, at least the government can do this to take online orders and deliver at home. That will make a lot of.
Ethyl alcohol, one the same thing, I think.
আচ্ছা সৌভিক এটা কি অফিশিয়ালি নোটিফিকেশন করে দিয়েছে অনলাইন
আমি দেখলাম someone shared তারপর আমি ওয়েবসাইটটাতে গিয়ে দেখলাম you can register with your name and details, address and all.
It's like a permit.
It's not a permit, it's like a online
normal e-commerce portal.
E-commerce portal, yeah. I haven't registered myself, but the option is there.
Now, I heard Chhattisgarh government was the first to announce online orders and delivery of liquor.
But interesting, if the government is doing this, then it should be allowed to the private parties as well. Which they were not letting for so long.
I think Maharashtra has banned it from today.
Shovik, তুমি একটা হাইকোর্টে রিট ঠুকে দাও।
Which is the way you are back to your photo instead of the video.
Sorry.
Better.
I was saying তুমি একটা রিট ঠুকে দাও। গভর্নমেন্ট করছে তো প্রাইভেট পার্টি কেন করতে পারে না?
আমায় করতে হবে না, I'm sure we'll get.
There are many people interested parties will do.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine how many people will subsidize your public interest litigation?
There will be people who will come and pay fees for us to do it.
I know.
Audience, we have about 10 participants already, and they are listening to whatever we are talking. So, just to communicate to the audience, this, you must feel free to talk about any legal issues, which are, both international contracts as well as domestic contracts, especially customer-facing contracts. At the same time, if you have any issues which relates to local law or even international law, if you have subsidiaries in other countries, you must feel free to ask questions, because we've got somebody, a practicing lawyer from UK, London, who is also with us today, and he's kindly agreed to address any international law related issues also. Mostly, of course, related to US and UK laws.
So I'm sharing the PPT, which has the introduction to the panelists.
Yeah, you can do that.
Yeah.
Abronila, it's 5 o'clock. So normally, what time do you start?
Yeah,
We
we
should be
start
starting
at
about
5.
now.
So should I introduce you now or should we wait for 5?
Okay. I think we can start at time. It's good that Kolkata will start in time.
Okay. Okay. Welcome everyone to another session of TiE Kolkata, a virtual webinar series that we have been doing since the start of the lockdown. So today's topic is COVID-19 legal issues in the IT and ITES sector. And we have with us Shovik Bhadra and Orijit as the speaker. And we are fortunate to have Mr. Hari Balasubramaniam, our past president, as the moderator. So over to you, sir.
Thank you, Abronila, and welcome to this webinar. I think TiE Kolkata has been doing a large number of events, and this webinar is something which has again kicked in a lot of activity, and I'm very happy to see participation also coming from all our members. So I hope all of you are safe, and all of you are sort of following all the rules and the safety precautions which have been advised. And I hope none of you are really affected directly or indirectly, from your family side with corona, because there have been a couple of people who have had this unfortunate incident, and they have been really stressed a lot in terms of finding both support as well as communicating with the patients who are admitted. Anyway, so I have a very distinguished panel. I've got a very young, dynamic lawyer, Shovik, who is based out of Calcutta, Mumbai, and Bangalore. And he practices out of Calcutta mostly, but he's got offices there. And Shovik is a charter member of TiE Calcutta, and does a lot of work in the corporate law side, which means contracts, private equity investments, due diligence, commercial law, and things like that. And Shovik has taken this initiative to bring in Arijit Das, one of his seniors and a very distinguished lawyer practicing in London. So I welcome both Shovik and Arijit for this webinar. And we've got mostly TiE members are entrepreneurs, or they would be senior executives in corporates who all are members, and we typically promote entrepreneurship. So Arijit, you must be knowing about TiE. Shovik, you are a charter member. I don't need to tell you anything. So without much ado, I think we should straight away start. Anybody who wants to ask a question, please feel free to use the chat line. In case you really want to talk, we will give you an option for that as well. So the Q&A box is open, as well as the chat box is open. I will monitor both of them. And, you can ask questions, and we will open it up after some time once both Shovik and Arijit, get a chance to address all of you about the commercial and legal issues, especially for the IT/ITES sector, but it doesn't matter. We can also address some of the non-IT issues as well. So over to you, Shovik.
Thank you, Hari sir. Arijit, thank you for making time for this. So the reason why we got on today was it's not just another webinar. I hope we want to add value to the members of TiE, and we understand a lot of them are from the IT/ITES sector. So what we're going to do is we are going to give you a legal framework of how things work, how contracts are there. Some of you must have already, facing certain issues in relation to the contracts that we have signed. And we will see if there is a default, how you can tackle that. We'll also deal with the clauses, the force majeure clause and the doctrine of impossibility, which the government of India has said that the COVID pandemic is a force majeure event. So we'll see how it translates into reality and how you can implement it. We'll also deal with issues under the employment laws. I know there are a lot of clients, both from IT/ITES sectors and from other sectors, who have been asking us questions, and we thought that this is something which is important to discuss and to give you an idea of what is relevant and what you need to be careful about before you take any decisions regarding your employees. And at the end, we'll discuss certain government policies which has been coming in force over the last month and a half. So I'll start the discussion with Arijit, because Arijit has headed multinational corporations, the legal department of the corporations, while negotiating contracts both in Europe as well as in India. So Arijit, what we were discussing yesterday, if you can just start off with that how a typical master service agreement or service level agreement works, and then we can deal with the nitty-gritties of it.
Absolutely. So, before I jump into the subject, I'll take a minute to introduce myself a little bit more. So to members of the audience, and right now we have 20 attendees. As the name suggests, Arijit, Bengali name, Bangali Chere. I've pretty much lived my life half and half. So half in India and half here in London. And as a lawyer that works in the world of information technology, the IT sector in India can best be explained with the analogy of baseball, where you have a pitcher and a catcher. Pitcher is someone who throws, a catcher is someone who picks up. And that is typically what happens in the world of outsourcing in India. A client from Europe or America pitches, throws work across the sea via broadband, and it's caught by a service provider in India, and they render services to the client. So it's a pitcher-catcher model, which means if anything happens in the West, it affects the East, because sometimes people stop pitching and there's nothing to catch. That is also what has happened in the COVID-19 situation. work has dried down. Now, before we get into looking at the implications of coronavirus, let's understand how the story is written in the world of information technology when it comes to the provision of services. It is typically documented in a contract which many of us know to be the master services agreement. A master services agreement or a services agreement is basically a document which tells a very simple story. Two parties have got together. The client will receive services in the manner documented in the contract, and that is written down in the main body of the contract and probably 10, 20 annexes below it that put down the details and specifics of the services that have to be rendered. And in exchange, the client pays you money for providing those services. Now, the contract obviously gets more sophisticated than that because it goes into what happens when you can't provide the services, what happens when the services are deficient. So typically, these master services contracts have been designed in a manner such that it can deal with a situation like COVID-19. But I say that, but I want to exercise caution. No one contemplated that something like this would need to be addressed, other than one lawyer that I know of. Now, typically in any of these contracts, you have a clause on force majeure, circumstances which is outside the purview of control of the parties, which prevent people from performing the contract. Now, in writing down this force majeure clause, lawyers across the globe have used a lot of imagination. And there used to be a lawyer in Texas, in a very famous law firm called Morgan Lewis. This lawyer was the head of the outsourcing department, and he was extremely expensive. Back in 2004, 2005, he used to cost about $800 to about $1,000 an hour. So yeah, he was an expensive lawyer. And his forte was to come up with clauses which dealt with unique situations. So in 1999, 1998, he started writing, contracts which had clauses that dealt with Y2K, year 2000. For those of you who remember, about 20 years ago, everyone thought the planet would come to an end because computers would not be able to calculate 2000. So the Y2K clauses were inserted into contracts. In 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005, the SARS clause was being documented. Now, this gentleman was one of the first lawyers in the world who came up with the specific SARS clause. It was a fairly elaborate clause which basically documented what would happen in a SARS-like situation. After that, the trend of putting these elaborate SARS clauses and all of that kind of died away, because the next thing that happened was the huge meltdown that took place, and clauses could not deal with that situation. So that is a roundabout way of saying lawyers have not been able to document properly what the coronavirus would be because no one saw this coming. Nonetheless, it is written down in contracts in your force majeure clause. So that, in a nutshell, is the legal framework which deals with coronavirus. And Shobik will be dealing with force majeure. He will be dealing with the doctrine of frustration and some of the other clauses. I want to look at the scenario from the perspective of what is practically likely to happen. It is true that work has dried down, but outsourcing contracts deal with different sectors. So it could be finance and accounting outsourcing. It could be HR outsourcing. It could be outsourcing of publishing. It could be outsourcing of development of applications work. Depending on what kind of outsourcing we're talking about, there's likely to be an impact on work. So something like HR outsourcing, processing of payrolls, coronavirus, no coronavirus, that is happening 24/7. Okay. But when it comes to, say, finance and accounting outsourcing, there is likely to be a dip in the number of invoices that the client is receiving. Hence, there is very little work that needs to be done out here. So it is true that work has dried down, but it's not a one-size-fits-all because it will depend from different sectors and what is the nature of IT outsourcing that the Indian service provider is dealing with. Then it comes to, so one is the pitcher. The pitcher is throwing a ball, but probably not as powerfully at this point of time because work with the pitcher has, dried down. The catcher. Now, once the catcher catches the work and is required to render services to the client, what difficulty is the catcher facing? Well, because of the lockdown, people can't come to offices. Yes, there is an implication. But think about it. This is IT outsourcing. This is not manufacturing. This is not mining where you actually need to go to a mine and dig. In IT outsourcing, people work on a computer using a broadband, which can either be in an office or it can be in your house. Now, remember, I had spoken to you about the force majeure clause. In addition to the force majeure clause, what you have in all these contracts is the BCP clause, Business Continuity Planning clause. The BCP clause is a schedule in the contract where the client chooses what level of business continuity they want. So the way it would work is imagine 100 people process that is doing finance and accounting outsourcing. These people sit in a building in Sector 5, and from there, they render services to a client in the United States. The client in the US will say that, look, it's possible that a force majeure event can strike in the future. If it happens, then I would like to have 25% coverage BCP or 50% coverage BCP, or maybe even 100% coverage BCP. So what does that mean? What it means is of the 100 people who are involved in the process, sitting out of a building in Kolkata, to clients in the United States, if there's a force majeure event like coronavirus, then the service provider is under an obligation to render reduced services from alternate premises. Now, this force majeure could be a bandh, it could be an earthquake, it could be tsunami. In the past, having worked for service providers like WNS, which has a very large center in Chennai, which was very adversely affected when the tsunami happened. It actually got washed off. A lot of people died. Then when it comes to dealing with bandhs, working for service providers like Genpact, who have offices in Kolkata, bandhs did affect us. Now, in those scenarios, what we would typically do is if the client wanted 25% BCP, then of the 100 people who are working on the process, 25 people will either be working from home or from an alternate building, rendering services to the client, but these services are going to be reduced. It will not be at the level which is a business as usual level. So there's the pitcher, there's the catcher. The pitcher has difficulty in throwing work. The catcher has difficulty in rendering services. But compared to other sectors, if you think about it, the IT services sector is likely to be less hit than others because of information technology. If you don't go to office, does not mean that you as a designated staff rendering BCP services to the client cannot sit out of your house in Baliganj or Baranagar on your computer, log on and render services. So my assessment is, compared to other sectors, the likelihood of coronavirus very adversely hitting the IT sector is reduced compared to other sectors. Now, this is just conjectural. None of us have been here before. And this is literally, putting a finger in the air and wondering what's going to happen next. So if I was a betting man, I would say that yes, like other crisis that has hit the Indian ITES sector, this too will adversely affect, but its effect is not likely to be very huge. The last thing I want to touch upon is the service provider's inability to provide services. Is that going to lead to a huge amount of litigation? No, I don't think so. In the last 20 years that I've been involved in the world of outsourcing, technology, and other areas, this sector is not litigious. They do not actually go to courts and sue each other. What tends to happen is parties use governance, that is, get together, have a discussion, a problem has come up, how can we solve for it? This is one situation where I see people utilizing governance a lot more in dealing with the specifics of the problems that they face. It's not a situation where the client can turn around and say, hey, listen, there's no fault at my end. You service provider, you've been goofing up. This is a situation that has affected the entire globe. So what I see likely to happen is conversations around the boardroom table. If there's one guidance I would leave members of this audience is, if a dispute is coming up, if you're noticing that clients are being unreasonably tough, rather than running straight to the court, you should sit down and have a conversation with the client. But when you have the conversation with the client, please make sure that you have already consulted lawyers who have looked at the specifics of your contract and have advised you which side of your bread is buttered. With that, I'll stop. I'd love to hear more questions, such that, if there's any specifics that you would like to understand, I can speak about that.
Thank you, Arijit. I think there is someone who wants to ask a question, so we'll take that. Apranila, how do we make sure we can take this question?
You just read the question and start answering.
No, I think Dipendra has raised his hand and would like to ask a question. Or I don't know. This is.
No, we have a question panel, so the questions are there in that box. You can look at the questions.
The question that is there, I don't think it's relevant to what Arijit just spoke about. So what we'll do is, all these questions we'll take at the end of the entire discussion. If there is anything which is specific to the part that the speaker is saying, we'll take it immediately. If there is any other question that you might have, we'll take that at the end of it. Thank you. So thank you, Arijit. I think that was a very illuminating perspective that we got. I will very briefly just add on to what Arijit said and say that, when you're, I understand a lot of your clients might not be based abroad, but the principle remains the same. The kind of agreement that you typically enter into, you have certain obligations, and I am assuming most of you would be service providers. So you will have a set of deliverables with a specific timeline of certain quality. We'll have to make sure that is done. Now, this pandemic might affect that. It might, on the other hand, it might also happen that when you are asking the client for certain information or some approval or certain payment based to certain timeline, that might also not be coming in. So in either of these cases, as Arijit said, the best option is to preempt what kind of situation is happening and to speak to them, see your contract, see what you are obliged to do, see what the clients are obliged to do, and talk to them. If we must come down to the extent of deciding whether it's a force majeure situation or not, we need to understand what is a force majeure. It is a contractual right, and unlike in certain other jurisdictions, common law jurisdictions, where even if you don't have it in your contract, you can invoke it. In India, you can't do that. There is something else in India. I'll come to that later. but you can't invoke force majeure unless there is a specific force majeure clause in your contract. So you need to check your contract and clarify that. Even if it's there, it depends on the wordings. It depends on what is included in force majeure and what is not. And I've been advising some of the clients over last 1 month who many of them said that, there is a force majeure clause, so we should take advantage of that and, whatever obligations we have. And then we realized that even though there is a force majeure clause, it might not include a situation like a pandemic. It might say, like there was in one agreement, it said that the office premises has to be damaged or it has to turn unusable for them to invoke the clause. So that really doesn't help in this kind of a situation. But yes, if it's something which is there, the next step would be to see whether it gives you extra time, you or the other party, extra time to perform your obligation, or whether it gives you an option to terminate it. Now, again, if it's not there in the contract, it doesn't mean that you cannot extend time. Again, you have to go back, talk to the other party, and you can always agree on a revised timeline. You can always agree on new terms, which are not there in the agreement. And yes, if it comes to that, then you can consider, okay, I'm just looking at the questions. Again, I think we'll take take all these questions at the end. Moving on to the next stage, what if you don't have a force majeure clause in your agreement? So for that, we have something which is called the doctrine of frustration, or the doctrine of impossibility, which again is a common law doctrine, but it has been encoded in India in the Contract Act, which says that if a contract that you have entered into subsequently, after the contract has been entered into, subsequently becomes impossible by any reason which you couldn't have prevented or affected in any way, then it's not the obligation of perform such things is not on you. Now, this has been very interestingly interpreted by the courts in different ways. So there are certain judgments which says that it was back in 1950s when it was there's a seminal judgment which says that this kind of impossibility or change of circumstance has to be such that it changes the very premise on basis of which you had entered into the contract, right? So if you had entered into a contract assuming that the situation would be such and you would be able to perform certain obligations, and the situation changes to such an extent that it's no longer the same, then only you can take advantage of that. There are subsequent cases which says that a mere financial difficulty is not included in it. There's a very seminal, I think, UK case which says that, which envisaged a situation that a ship would have carried certain goods over a route. Now, for whatever reasons, that route could not be followed, and they had to cover a few thousand kilometers more, but which increased the overall cost, and it became untenable for the ship owner. But it was held that it's a mere financial difficulty which does not render the contract to be impossible. So again, it's a subjective test. You have to see to what extent you can deliver the contract. It depends on the courts. But what you can do is, once you see that the situation is not conducive enough for you to sit down and discuss, and the other side is probably not agreeing to come to a mutual understanding, and you have to take the legal route, you have to, if you have to send a notice, you have to argue it in a way which is acceptable to the courts should the matter reach the court in future. Now, moving on to the next issue, which again is something not restricted to IT/ITES sector. This is a problem which most of the sectors are facing, a lot of startups are facing, because a lot of them run in very thin profit margins. So it's become difficult for a lot of them to pay the salary of the employees that have been working with them. Now, there are two notifications which came out in the government which have been in discussions and which we have dealt with in the recent past. One was an order from the Ministry of Home Affairs, which is under the Disaster Management Act, which essentially said that during the lockdown, you cannot deduct salary, you have to pay full salary to the workmen. And even if it is impossible for the workmen to work to the workers. The term that they use was worker. If it's impossible for them to continue their work, even then it would be assumed that they are uh, providing their service and there is no reason for you to deduct the salaries. Now, very interestingly, the term which was used is worker. Now, worker is not a term which is defined in most of the labor statutes, except in Factories Act, which is not applicable in most of the sectors, including in ITA sector. So why did the government use such a term, which creates more ambiguity? Now, it's obviously there is no clarification that has come out from the government yet, but our feeling is that it is done with an intention to make it broader, to include everyone. Because otherwise, if they had used a term like workman, which is a very specific term defined in statutes like the Industrial Dispute Acts and the Contract Labor Act, it refers to a certain section of the employees, people who are not in managerial or administrative position, who earns less than a certain amount of salary, which in West Bengal would be around 10,000, about 15,000 in Maharashtra. And there are certain protections which is accorded by the statutes to them. But this order is not only specific to them, it's a broader dictum from the government. And because it is, and there are certain arguments coming up from lawyers who have argued that the Ministry of Home Affairs couldn't have passed this because it is not under the labor legislations. Again, the ambits of the Disaster Management Act is quite wide. And we honestly don't see at this point of time any High Court or Supreme Court going against the government and striking it down. So we have to live with it. And the obligation of salary payment comes under the Shops and Establishment Act, Payment of Wages Act, Minimum Wages Act, so on and so forth. And also, a lot of the companies, we take service of contract laborers through contractors, through agencies who depute their people at your premises. Even then, we have to keep in mind, as the principal employer, you have to be responsible, you are responsible under law to ensure that they get their due. Even if the contractor does not pay their due amount, you are responsible under law to ensure it is done. There are instances which has come out in the media, and also we have seen from our clients where people are taking leave without pay, or they're asked to go to leave without pay. And a lot of these arguments have come from the situation abroad, including in UK, where there's a system of furlough. Essentially the same thing when you send someone on leave without pay. But there is a fundamental difference between a situation like in India, in UK, and that in India. In UK, the government pays a certain sum of money, the subsistence amount, to all those people who are sent to furlough. In India, we don't have anything like that. And the laws does not envisage this kind of a situation. So there is an obligation of every employer under the Payment of Wages Act to pay their salary unless they have not turned up for work. And you are responsible to keep paying the salary. Unless, and this is an exception which works both in terms of salary as well as in terms of discontinuation of service. The only exception is if an employee agrees, gives their consent to take a lesser wage, to take a to work without pay in writing, only then it's all right, not otherwise. So next we discuss about, again, yet another notification from the government. This one was from the Ministry of Labour and Employment on 20th March 2020. The interesting difference between this one and the earlier one about wages that we discussed is the wording is very different. Here it says that the employers are advised. Now, an advisory under law doesn't have the operations of law. So it is an advice which is expected that you would follow. But if you do not follow, probably it's difficult for the government to enforce it. But here also you must realize that if you are thinking about terminating services of your employees, there can be two broad divisions. One are the employees with whom you probably have a contract, who do not fall within the definition of workmen, as we already discussed. And for them, you can probably see the termination clause in the agreement if you have to pay them You give them notice for a month or 2 months, whatever is there in the contract, pay them that amount, and you can ask them to leave. But what about the workmen? There is a specific procedure, again, under law, by which you can retrench or lay them off. There is a specific formula. So you have to give them 1 month's notice anyway, and there's a specific formula which you have to follow, in which you have to give them a compensation. The two formulas, depending on whether it's a retrenchment or layoff, I'm not getting into the nitty-gritties of it, but you have to pay them certain amounts. And if it's a bigger unit where you have more 100 or more employees, then you can't just unilaterally do that. You have to first do some filings with the government departments, and only when the government approves it, then you can do it. The difference, the exception, again, is if an employee agrees to it. If he tenders their resignation and say that, yes, we don't have any due, then there is nothing that it can happen to you. Some of you might remember the older entrepreneurs that in the 70s, 80s, we had a lot of settlements that happened between the management and the trade unions. That used to happen under the approval that, if a individual has a statutory right, that individual or a trade union can waive that right if they deem so. But unless they agree to it, unless they consent to it, there is nothing much you can do except following the statutory path.
So I will just interrupt you,
yes,
and
sir.
I will put you on the spot. See, today, all these things that you're talking about is related to government notification, government rules and other things. Practically, if you see, most of our members who employ people, they have today a challenge. What should they do about the salaries? Because everybody was thinking, okay, if it is only March, we will somehow manage.
Yes.
But now it is extended. It has become April, May, and now we don't know when it is actually going to become normal. So
Absolutely.
the problem is most of the small companies do not have cash flows to pay, because they have not got the capital to back them up, or they have not got the monies from their customers. Right? Customers have also stopped paying, in most cases. So what is the practical? So they all want to tell their staff that, okay, no, we cannot pay you, or they have to say that, okay, you please go home, or you go on furlough, which we have not heard about in India before. So what is the practical advice which, as a lawyer, you would tell our members?
So the advice that we have had to come down with, because there is nothing you can do if you don't have money. If that is the genuine situation, you have to be honest with your employees. And what I have seen in my experience of last 1 month, the employees are quite sympathetic about this entire situation. They know no work is happening. They know money is not coming in. So if you tell them that, this is the amount I have, this is what I can distribute among you for this period of time. Beyond that, I don't know what's going to happen. That's probably the best approach. Most of them are agreeing to it. Most of them are giving in writing that they're agreeing to it. So tomorrow, if the government takes any step, which might happen down the line, I don't know what's going to happen about that. You will have to deal with that later on. But as long as you have consent of your employees that they have agreed to take, instead of rupees 100 a month, which is their due, they have agreed to take rupees 20. That's fine. You will have something to live for. And if it's that bad, when you might have to go in liquidation or something like that, there is nothing much you can do. The only thing I suggest and I advise my clients is, don't do something which might be interpreted as a criminal offense later on. It should not show that you had the money, or you said something which was untrue, or you did something to deceive your employees. So that should not happen. You have to be honest upfront and get their consent on what you're doing, and that's the best thing you can do.
So if a general meeting of the employees is called, and the employer and the employees sit together and they create a minutes of the meeting saying that, okay, everybody is taking a cut in the salaries and things like that, do you think that is sufficient protection for the employer, from a future legal course of action?
Yes, we think so. Because the moment you have them on board and you have something in writing that they had agreed to it, you are mostly saved. You can tomorrow, if someone files a case against you or take any steps against you, be it the government, be it any disgruntled employee, and there might be some disgruntled employee. You can't expect that if you have 50 employees, all 50 of them would agree. There might be one or two who would want to take legal steps against you. But what can you do about that? If you don't have money, there's nothing much you can do. Let them go and file a case. The courts are not open at this point of time. You might survive. When they file the case will take its own time to come up. At that point of time, you might be in a better situation. You might enter into a settlement with him. He can withdraw the case. But that only happens if you survive today.
Yeah.
So for that, the best option is to take them in confidence and take their consent.
Okay, thank you for that, Souvik. I want to ask a question to all the participants. You know, if you have any international contracts and some of those contracts you are actually trying to figure out how to handle it, you know, this is the best time for you to actually post any question, or if you want me to open your chat window, I can open it so that you can speak directly to Arijit and Souvik. And the other thing I wanted to ask is, you know, are you having problems in collecting monies from your customers? And that's creating a problem for you in terms of your cash flows. And what have you thought about that in case, because many customers could go under, in the sense they could go bankrupt. There are many companies which could close down right now, or at least say that they're closing down because they don't want to pay their vendors. So if you are having these type of situations, I think it is important for you to address the panelists in terms of what is the best course of action for you to do. And of course, there are a couple of questions which I would now like to throw to Souvik. You know, in the question box, we have a question from Diptendra and SK Arora. If you can sort of address that, you know, to the best of your abilities.
Right. Diptendra's question, I think there are 3 questions probably.
No, there is one question which has been taken away.
Yes, yes. Okay, so I'm taking Diptendra's question. I think by GMC, you're referring to the general medical certificate. So there is no legality except what the government, the notification that is coming up. So that is the legality of it. You have to comply by that. Otherwise, the government can take steps against you. There is no other statute which lays this down. This is not something which is, all this is under the, you know, the Disaster Management Act, which is a fairly new act, and the extent of it has not been legally challenged yet. So whatever notifications are coming up from time to time, you are supposed to comply with that. If there is any genuine difficulty with that, you have to coordinate with the government departments. But what step they might take in future, group mediclaim. See, I don't know about your
group mediclaim policy. GMC is group mediclaim.
Right. So I think a lot of your employees would ultimately be covered under ESI, which if you have in place, then I think that takes care of this. Now, the government has already said that the existing mediclaim will have to honor COVID. So I think that more or less takes care of it. If you don't have it, and if the government has now issued a circular to take that, it's advisable to go for it.
So this is putting a lot of pressure on you know, employers, that suddenly if you have to take a group medical for 100 people, 500 people, it's a huge payout, you know, which they cannot afford, and they cannot comply
actually,
with.
Sir, if you look at it that way, I mean, it's not a legal point, but the cost to take a mediclaim is much less than actually, you know, the risk that might happen if you don't follow it. The cost of following the law is cheaper.
No, I agree to that. But, you know, all of a sudden, you know, along with this, all these other problems, you know, this taking an additional policy, because all these policies will become active only when you pay fully, right? Now they are not able to pay salaries. They have to take a group medical policy, right? So that's the challenge. That's a problem.
No, so I think one general answer I would give, if it's something that you have an obligation to do and you are unable to do it because you do not have the money, then you have to, even if it's a government department, you will have to write to them that this is the situation. Nobody can force you anything but just by issuing a circular until and unless they go to court. Even the government, if they want to do something, they will go to court, or you will have to. Diptendra, like I said, if there is no separate statute on it, there is no other act on it. The notification in itself is all that we have. There is no more legality beyond what you can see and what we can see there. Thank you. There is another question from Mr. Arora. You have mentioned that your landlord has sent a notice due to non-payment of rent. They can, yes, but my question would be twofold. First, is it because of non-payment during the lockdown, or is it beyond that? And second, do you have a force majeure clause in your agreement? In either case, I think the best option at this point of time would be to respond to that. If you have a force majeure clause, you can invoke that from your agreement. If you do not have it, you can invoke Contract Act. That it's a situation you have to invoke impossibility and say that it's not possible for us to.
Souvik, I have one question for
Yes.
this leave and license agreement, which are 11 months,
Yes.
which is more, easier to execute for both
Right.
sides. In
Right.
those type of situations, what will happen, if they don't pay? Because it is definitely in the normal course of business, if you don't pay rent for 2-3 months, you can be thrown out, right? Now,
Yes.
in this particular situation, if they have a force majeure clause, they can take, recourse to that.
Sir, honestly, most of the live-in license agreements don't have a force majeure clause to start with.
Oh,
But
okay.
if they have, typically I haven't seen, because these are very, short contracts, which people don't really get into all those intricacies. Anyway, so irrespective of whether you have force majeure or not, if you have force majeure, you have to invoke that. If you don't have force majeure, then you have to invoke impossibility. Either case, you have to say that, it was not possible for me to carry out my business and not possible for me to pay. Secondly, you have to, there's another practical difficulty which we have seen for other clients also. How do you vacate the premises? You might have machineries there, you might have your computers there. It's not possible for you to go and vacate the premises at this point of time either.
So it has to be eviction notice.
So they have to, so if they have to go and evict you, they will have to follow the due process of law. If it goes to that, at the worst case scenario, what you have to do is to approach a court. And nowadays we have this, the courts are sitting through video conference. Though it's slow and not many matters are being taken up, at the worst case scenario, you have to go approach a court and take an injunction saying that nobody should be able to evict me without following due process of law. Now, if they have to follow due process of law, they have to file a civil suit in a court, which will take a few years to get resolved. So my suggestion would be,
there is a situation like that today for somebody, he has to go to High Court.
Not High Court. It has to be in the district court, whichever has jurisdiction. It depends on the value of the entire suit, but typically it will go to the district court. Okay, I'm just scrolling down to check the other queries. There's one from Mr. Roy, Kingshuk Roy. Salary negotiation for white-collar employees in a SME, where a section of disgruntled employees may refer to shareholder profits of the previous year as half the money, and hence restructure of salaries is not acceptable. The legal perspective. Is it legal to start a dialogue with employees during the extended lockdown period? I'll answer the second one first. Yes, it is absolutely legal to start a dialogue. There is no bar on you having a dialogue with anyone at any point of time. Even if you are in a litigation with someone, you can parallelly have a dialogue. There is nothing that bars you from having a dialogue. But yes, you have to be a little careful about what you put in writing, or what you, and writing, I mean, even on emails, that you have to be a little careful about, so that it's not taken as something you have accepted or you have admitted subsequently. Salary negotiation, yes, they may refer to shareholder profit of previous year. Now the shareholder profit might have been already issued as dividends. In that case, it is not there in the company anymore. Or if it's there in the company and you have exhausted that, then the company doesn't have any money. So in either case, if you genuinely do not have money to pay, you cannot pay. And by you, I mean the company, the entity, if it doesn't have the money. So anyone can argue anything, anyone can level any allegations against you, but it has to be something which has to be proven in a court of law. As long as you have your case, you are acting as per the law, whatever allegation someone may bring, they have to prove it in a court. I think there's one question for Arijit, whether there are any lessons that the Indian IT sector can learn from the UK IT sector. Arijit, would you like to take this one?
Yeah, I'll definitely give it a shot. But if you just think about it, the UK IT sector is essentially today a bunch of companies that have that are either very local or they're international. So the very local ones have customers across the globe, but are specifically based in the United Kingdom. There are very few of them. And that's mainly because of the cost of development in the United Kingdom. The second bunch of companies, the larger ones that have more of a global footprint, definitely have presence in India, China, Philippines, Romania, and some of the lower cost jurisdictions so that they can leverage on the skills, talent, and the cost arbitrage. If you think about it, there is not a huge lot that the Indian IT sector can learn from the UK IT sector. Because at this point of time, the India IT sector is far larger and far more sophisticated than the UK IT sector. The UK IT sector merely has work which is chucked across to countries like India, China, Romania, and they are the ones who render the services. So it's a long-winded way of saying, we should be very proud of where we have got to. I think it's the other way around. People are asking the question, what can we learn from the India IT sector? And that is not to say that there's nothing that can be learned. There's always learning that takes place. But no, I think in terms of the way the sector is conducting itself, it's super. Are there any other questions for me? I mean, specific to the international aspect of
I personally think that I've again asked in the chat box for people to ask specific questions. So I don't think there are any questions related to international contracts at this point of time. So just I would say, Arijit, that we don't have any questions on contracts, especially international contracts, and especially the master service agreements and things like that at this point of time. I would ask the audience once again, if you have any questions, local or international, please, this is your time to ask. So we are almost 1 hour into the program, 10 minutes left. So if there are any questions, IT and non-IT also can be addressed now. Anybody who wants a non-IT question, can throw it now. So one question is from Abhishek Sengupta about the travel sector. He says, the travel sector is issuing credit notes, most of the companies, and their clients are paid cash. So clients are demanding cash now, and companies are not paying cash. They are only giving credit notes. So this is a problem which many of them are facing, especially in the travel sector. So
I'm just reading the question. I think it's from Mr. Abhishek Sengupta. Correct? Yeah, I'm just reading that.
I had considered the question, and whilst I feel this is best for an expert like Shobik to answer, I must say that this trend that you're seeing in India, it's not just in India. It's happening across the globe. Now, what they're doing is definitely wrong and is against IATA norms. So IATA norms and regulations are very clear. If the flight is cancelled, then you have to refund the money. What we are seeing across the globe with many of these companies, not just in the travel industry, is CFOs have become extremely scared about the cash position. See, a company survives or goes under depending on the cash it has in the bank when it's weathering a storm. So all the CFOs are basically saying, hold on to the cash, don't refund anything. If we get sued, we'll get sued. The judgment will come 12, 24, 36 months later. So my heart goes out to this question that has been asked, because unfortunately, in my mind, I can't think of an effective legal remedy. Shovik, I'd love for you to share your thoughts.
I agree with you. And Abhishek, what you asked here, I think what you are doing is everyone else doing. You can't do anything more than passing over the credit note to your customers. It's not your obligation at this point of time. It's the airlines or the hotel's obligation. I don't see a situation where you would be legally held liable for this. But again, it depends on what kind of situation we see in future. But I don't see a primary responsibility from your end. But yes, there might be some frivolous cases that you can't prevent. You can't prevent anyone from filing cases or complaining to the police or anyone. But you have to deal with it as it comes. The responsibility lies with the airlines, and they will have to deal with it. But like Arijit said, the airlines are doing it because they are also cash strapped. So we don't know what way it's going to go. And if the situation is such that the airline is genuinely unable to pay, then if a court passes an order against them to pay out, they will go bust.
You know, Shovik, in the world of in-house, as opposed to, say, being an external lawyer in a law firm, I, as a general counsel, would very often get asked business questions which may or may not have had legal answers. And this, feels clearly like one. So, this is not formal advice, but if I was, if I was advising this business, here's what I would say. Look, yes, legal cases, legal position, definitely, but this is more of a CFO issue than a legal issue, because CFOs across the globe are holding on to cash. I'm sure your CFO, your accountant is probably trying to do exactly the same. But, you have your customers and you have a business reputation that needs to be kept afloat even through this crisis. The only thing that you can do is be transparent to these customers who are asking for this refund. And that is to say that, look, the airlines are not giving us the money. They're issuing us credit note. We can't give you anything better than what we get from the airlines. At least that way, you will be to some extent able to preserve your market reputation through this crisis.
So, Arijit, I had one question for you. If IATA rules, clearly specify that in case there is no travel and in case the flight is cancelled, it has to be refunded. Even if an IATA diktat is issued, nothing is going to happen because the airlines control IATA?
No, airlines do not control IATA. IATA definitely has power, but the airlines are also extremely powerful. So over the years, I'm not an airline lawyer, but what I have noticed is from time to time, IATA, in some parts of the world, takes action against some airlines. And very often it doesn't. It just doesn't.
Okay.
But, IATA and its reach in India is very limited. And I actually formally don't know what the reach is. So it's something I probably will need to research. I'm not an expert in the area. But Harida, if you think about it, by the time someone writes a bunch of letters to IATA, by the time IATA picks it up, by the time the IATA gets in touch with the airline, 8 months have already gone.
Absolutely.
That travel agency has disappeared from the face of the earth.
Absolutely. Airlines are shutting down like crazy, right? So I guess.
So just to dispel, I think Abhishek's concern here, the money that the airline has taken is taken directly from the customer because they have issued the ticket in the name of the customer. The charge that you have collected, you are only responsible for that part. So legally, I don't see an immediate concern right now. Arijit, there is another question for you, I think, in the Q&A box. Mr. Saluja has asked, how is the pharma outsourcing placed now? Can you please elaborate a bit on its structure also that has existed so far? Would you take
When
this
you
up?
say pharma outsourcing, what do you mean? Is this drug research? Is this IT outsourcing by pharma companies? I mean, do members of the audience have the ability to speak? And this is a question for the organizers.
Abronila?
Yes,
Okay,
Ashish
listen.
Saluja, answer live.
Okay.
Ashish Saluja can speak.
Just trying to go.
Ashish Saluja, allowed to talk. Yes, Ashish Saluja, you can talk.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, Ashish, we can hear you.
Okay, I simply was referring to the normal, IT-enabled services. Like you mentioned, companies like WNS, so they have a lot of pharma outsourcing to companies like GSK, and also
No, it's the
referring to
other way around,
services.
Ashish. So I just finished a stint with GSK, where I was their global head for privacy and technology-related laws. So yeah, I was definitely involved. So GSK spends about 800 million pounds every year with different IT companies, asking IT companies to develop apps for them and provide services. So these companies have been giving work to providers for a long period of time. Just to give you an idea, in 2005, I first documented the first contract between Genpact and GSK. 5 years later, it came up for renegotiation in 2010. I did that as well. In 2015, once again, the contract got negotiated. So these were all 5-year contracts. I saw 3 negotiations between Genpact and GSK. Then when I was at WNS, GSK has outsourced some of its research related to social profiles of people in the digital space. And WNS renders them services utilizing almost 900 FTEs. So to answer your question, the pharma companies have organized themselves fairly well and have become sophisticated users of IT services. Does that answer your question?
So in present scenario, can you hear me, guys? Hello.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I was just saying, in the present scenario, is the pharma sector outsourcing also suffering like other sectors, or do you foresee?
Oh, every sector is suffering. Every sector is suffering. I live 2 miles from the global headquarters of GSK, and I cycle past it every day, to get my daily routine. That building, which is bustling with 5,000 people at any given point of time, looks like a ghost town. There's no one going in, there's no one coming out. So what that means is people are sitting and working from their homes, but if you imagine commercial activity to be on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being, year closing, contract negotiations happening, everyone firing on all cylinders, huge amount of M&A going on. That's 10. A lot of commercial activity. 0 is more like the Christmas period where nothing happens. Okay. What we are witnessing today is between 3 and 5, which means projects which are already underway, there's some of that happening. New projects, no, I don't see that happening. Those kind of projects happen when people get together. Now everyone is holding back buying, everyone is holding back decision making. So I think new work has suffered. Guys,
Sir,
I'm sorry, I will have to log off.
Yes, we are also in the end. It's 6 here. Hari sir, we can't hear you.
Just Arijit, just we'll take last 2 questions, 2 minutes, and we will sign off. So there is a question about IT companies, government support. Just 1 second. Showman. No, there is no special package for software development sectors. You will have to find for your own, or for general industry, whatever is happening, that is what you will get. Chashma Market has got a question. Yes, Chashma Market, you can ask your question. this is related to source code and other things which of employees. That's a normal course of business. If employees take away source code and run away, you have to chase them legally at this point of time. You cannot do anything else.
Okay.
Does this answer your question?
Yes, yes. So legally means how?
So
Legally
you can send a notice. You can file a case against them. It can be a civil claim. It can be a criminal action.
Okay.
But right now, it's probably not the best situation considering the courts are shut.
Yeah. So you can take it offline, send a mail to, or have a chat with Shobik separately,
Yeah.
and see if there is any legal services which can be rendered for this, whether any recourse is there or not.
Yeah. Okay.
So Abranila, we will give it back to you. I would like to thank, Arijit especially, who's taken time to join us from London. And Abranila, over to you. Thank you very much to all the participants.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I thank all the participants and the speakers for the webinar. And I would also like to thank our sponsors, Tata Tele, Kshitij.com, Diadem, Cashless Bazaar, 10 Downing Street, ICICI Bank, LinkedIn Local, and Head Start. We have another session coming up tomorrow, 7th May. Please tune in and keep looking out for more TiE webinars. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Abranila. Thank you, Shobik. Thank you, Arijit.
Thank you.